This time on Bone Dry Retro, we're going to flip the script a little bit. I've been talking a lot about why retro gaming sucks, and there are a lot of reasons why, but found out about how retro gaming sucks mainly because of how good retro gaming can be. I didn't want to make it seem as if retro gaming is bad overall. It's just that there are a lot of things that are annoying and you need to know before you get into the hobby. So now let me inspire you to get into the hobby with reason number one. And this is going to be for a select group of people, but it's nostalgia. It's the number one reason why people get into retro gaming. It's to relive the past. It's to feel things that they felt back then or to have memories of their younger times. Nostalgia is a great thing. It's a double-edged sword, of course. Expectations can be set that sometimes can't be met, but when it works, it really works. For instance, the first time I played Time Pilot back there, that sign back there, when I played it after I played the first time I played it as a retro game, let's say, it brought me right back to the arcade, right back to when I was not even a teenager yet. I remember the smell of the place. I remember the positioning of the game. It was next to Qbert, which was next to Buck Rogers' Planet of Zoom. So I vividly remembered everything that I probably wouldn't have remembered without playing it again. So it sparked that memory, which opened up the door to so many other memories too, other games that I forgot. Like, for instance, on the other side, back to back, they were in the arcade, was Kicks, a game that I'd forgotten how much I really liked when I was a kid. It's one of those games that could get lost to obscurity. And the beauty of retro games is because people have curated all of the games, that even if you can't find the physical media, you can get the emulation and play around with it. You can go on the Internet Archive and play some of these games in your web browser even. And it's not the big ones like, let's say, Pac-Man that will bring these waves of nostalgia back, perhaps. It's those obscure titles, like maybe Super Pac-Man, which was a game that came out a couple of years later that was vastly different that a lot of people might have forgotten, or a game like Jungle Hunt from the same time period was a game that maybe you might have forgotten about. Maybe you didn't, but maybe you didn't. When you play it, it really brings you back. And games have a power to do this in a way that not much other media does. It's when you get those obscure things. It's like when you hear that hit song from when you were in high school, the song that everybody knew. Okay, you'll remember some things, but you've heard that song recently, so it's a little different. But when you hear, let's say, the second song from that group that came out, that, you know, like, for instance, Aha's famous for Take On Me, and maybe you've heard it 100 times since it first came out, but they also had a second song, The Sun Doesn't Always Shine on TV. Now, when you hear that, that is isolated. You probably haven't heard that one in a long time, and therefore it's going to hit you with a wave of nostalgia. You're going to remember where you were, what you were doing. The more interactive something is, the more memory is created from it. It's why, for instance, people tell you, get all your senses involved if you want to study and remember things, and then bring those senses back in when you're being tested. Like I said before, when I play a game, that smell comes back to me. I remember playing Rampage in a pizzeria. It's the only place I really ever played it. And when I first replayed it, that's what came back, that greasy smell of the pizzeria. Even better than that, when you go back and play these old games, and then you remember the tricks, and you remember the different moves that you had to do, or you remember, for instance, if you haven't played Mortal Kombat in forever and you go back to playing it, you remember the fatalities. They come back eventually. And this is a great thing too, and I'll get into other videos on this. It's a great thing for memory. It's a great thing to stimulate memory, to go back to those times. People think maybe you shouldn't do that. No, you should do that. The game behind me, Star Wars, I hadn't played it in a long time on its original hardware and emulated it many times, and there's no joystick that can really emulate that X-Wing style controller that you can see back there. When I got that one arcade one-up machine, it brought me right back, and I got the maneuvers back the way I think. I was really good at the game when I was younger, and I got the maneuvers back when I played it again. That one and Empire Strikes Back, they're both on there. And I remember Empire Strikes Back was a game that I played. Maybe this is a little bit of fourth into the future, but I played in Disney World. At the resort we were at, they had it in the arcade, and I remember spending time playing. My parents going, "Why are you wasting time in Disney World playing a video game?" But I got really good at it for the week that we were there. So I was just going back and back. So it just brings me back. And it made me feel 12, or however old I was then, whatever it was, around that age. It just made me feel that when I go back and play the original Wizardry, Proving Grounds of the Mad Overlord, I get this wave of nostalgia every time I play it. And that's two versions that I played. I played the Apple IIe version, which I emulate, or I play in a browser window through the Internet Archive. And then I also played the NES version years and years later. And playing both of them, again, brings me back to, for instance, my dad mapped out Wizardry on graph paper. It took us forever to beat the game. We played together, and it was a lot of fun. And playing that again reminded me of he had his characters, I had mine. And my neighbor came over. She wanted to see the computer. What can the computer do? My mother didn't know much about the computer. I did. So I showed some productivity software. There wasn't much back then for an Apple IIe. But then I said, let me show you a game. And I, just out of curiosity, wanted to check out my dad's character. So dad's characters load up. Mom's friend, the neighbor, accidentally hits the power switch, kills my dad's characters off. And back then, there was a utility on there where you could rescue your characters. But most times, if that happened, you got set back. So we were in a shopping center the next day, and my dad was going to have time at home to play. And my mom's on the payphone. This is how long ago this was. Mom's on the payphone. And all I hear is put him on the phone. And I froze. And he was mad. He thought I did it on purpose. He thought I was trying to beat him. And then I explained to him, no, I didn't do that. I tried to explain to him what happened. To this day, I don't know if he believed me or not. He was just frustrated because he had a bad day at work and was really looking forward to going home and playing those games. And his son destroyed his character. So that all came back. It was a memory that I'd had. But when you don't access that memory, you're going to forget. I mean, that's been gone a long time. So it was, when I go back and play that, it sparks that memory up a bit. It's a bittersweet one in a way, but it's still great. And the NES version I played when I had mono on the NES. I was home from college and I was playing it on the NES. It was, it was 1990 something, I think. And that's why I had just enough strength to be able to play that game. And playing it reminds me of that 3 or 4 week period that I was just bedridden playing that game. That's all I played, and I beat it. And I loved the game. So that's, again, not a great memory, I guess, but in a way it was. I mean, it was a fun time. Again, my dad's in that memory too, because the 2 days I didn't play was because I passed out. I fell asleep. I was so weak, I fell asleep. And we were kind of watching the World Series together a little bit. And I said, oh, wow, okay, if the Reds win tonight, then, they have 2 more, and they win. But that was, no, they win tonight. That's pretty much it. I'm like, well, what are you talking about? He goes, you've been asleep for like 48 hours, pretty much. You lost all that. And again, replaying Wizardry brought that back. So that's what the positives of nostalgia. You'll see people talk negatively about nostalgia. And yeah, there is some things, sometimes it's not good to be too nostalgic, to go back and think that when it was 1990, it was a better time or simpler time. It's foolish to think that in a lot of ways, because it was simpler for me. I'm pretty sure my father didn't think that 1990 was a simpler time than maybe 1970 was, because he was younger in 1970. I was younger in 1990. We look at life through our own eyes, through our own perceptions, and video games really spark a lot of reaction in our brains when we play them, and they can create these memories. I have vivid memories of what my characters in Wizardry looked like, even though the game did not display them ever. They had names, and I knew what they looked like. And that's something that comes back when I play. Bard's Tale is another one that does that. And I could list on and on and on the amount of games that I've played. Even Metal Gear Solid. First apartment, I had the PlayStation. Affording rent and buying games did not go hand in hand, so to speak. So when I got a game, I really had to immerse myself in it because I couldn't afford many. So I picked carefully. And I wasn't going to get Metal Gear Solid. I wasn't sure about it. I wasn't sure if it was my type of game or not. And it turned out to be one of the most fascinating experiences for me ever. Now, that memory will stay with me. I don't need the nostalgia for that, but the little things that you forget. Playing that game, replaying it actually just reminded me of, it was the first game that my roommate at the time had watched me play and he got into it too. And that led to us playing GoldenEye together a little bit later on. And that's just another example of something I might have forgotten about. I knew we played GoldenEye together, but I never really realized or remembered what triggered that. So that's something, again, that nostalgia does. Nostalgia is a good thing. It's nice to live in the past a little bit, to appreciate what we've done and to appreciate where we are. I mean, I always think that today is better than yesterday. We're not perfect, but we're getting better. And sometimes going back in the past, even positively, we'll say, well, yeah, this is great. And it reminds me of so many things that I love. But it reminds me, for instance, playing Metal Gear 1 reminds me of my love for all the Metal Gears and all the games in that genre and all the games I've played afterwards. it reminds me of how much I love that first PlayStation. And within my PlayStation 5 is the soul of that PlayStation 1 in so many ways. So that's something that nostalgia does. And in games, it does it in a way that, you really can't attach to. Music does it in a sense, movies do it in a sense, but they're not active. And games are active. And we live in a time right now where we can afford to be nostalgic because it's so easy to revisit the past. A simple Google search gets you whatever it is that you want. Internet Archive, like I said, gets you all the nostalgia you could possibly want. So we live in a very nostalgia-driven society, and games are at the forefront of that. And retro gaming has so many positives, and definitely number one is the nostalgia, the going back and feeling 12, feeling 16, feeling 25, which for some of you might seem, like maybe ahead of you, but it's just nice to be able to go back and see the path you've taken and understand. I know why I play games and I know why I've continued to play games, but sometimes I need to be reminded the little intricacies of that. And that's what the nostalgia of video games does. So for reason number one, nostalgia, more coming. So please subscribe, hit the like button if you feel so inclined to do so. I'd really appreciate that. Doing this just for fun more than anything else, and I hope to continue to do it.